Yay! Ooh,
I said I was ready.
You did. You said you were ready, and I almost caught you off guard, but I didn't. What is up, everyone? Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 298. Half of my face is covered in sun.
Oh, boy.
I'm not worrying about it. Because
that's not
it's
makeup?
sun. No, it's not. I don't have tiger claw scratches on my face. Welcome to the early edition of Ginger Runner Live. It is Monday at 4 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, PDT?
I had to Google if we're PST or PDT.
I hate it. Pacific Time. But this is 11 p.m. Lisbon time. Our guest tonight is coming to us from that location, Kaytlyn Gerbin. We're going to have on the show tonight to chat all about her incredible crushing of the Transgrancanaria course this weekend. New course record, absolutely demolished it. So excited to talk to her about her big race. And we're even going to touch a little bit on the Coastal Challenge, which she also won weeks ago. So it'll be a fun episode to talk to Kaytlyn again. It's been an amazing year so far, and we're already in the third month, or only in the third month. Just into it too. So sit back, relax, everyone. Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 298, coming to you a little bit earlier with a bit of sun. We're getting used to it. Here we go. Ginger Runner.
People can't see me, right?
Yay! Kaytlyn was dancing in the background. You can't see her yet. We haven't introduced her. But we can.
And the dancing was incredible.
The moves are pretty damn good. Welcome, everyone, to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 298.
We are up there.
I think the top is 300. So we're just
and then we're
there.
done.
and then we're done. There's no more up. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thank you for taking some time out of your busy Mondays to spend a little bit of it with us. We are a little bit earlier tonight, and we made the announcement earlier today that we were doing an earlier show today. We did this earlier with John Kelly a couple weeks back. We had John Kelly, amazing runner, on the show from Great Britain, and we moved the time slot earlier. Mm-hmm. It works just fine for everybody if we can get people who are as amazing as John Kelly and our guest today. If we can get them on the show and it just involves starting a bit earlier, we're all for it. Our guest tonight is Kaytlyn Gerbin. We've had her on the show before. She's a champion ultra runner, has placed top 10 at Western States multiple years in a row, had just in this year alone, and we're just into the third month of it, has won the Coastal Challenge in Costa Rica, which is the stage race, multi-day race along the coast of Costa Rica, and just won Transgrancanaria, which I can't wait to hear about because it just sounds...
No big deal.
No big deal.
Just like super casual way to start the year.
Making waves. And this is so exciting because she's a local Pacific Northwesterner. She shreds it on the trails that Kim and I trip over a lot, I think, is a comparison. But it's just so cool. I walk
around on them.
We walk around and Kaytlyn runs here. It's just so fun to have a local runner making the splash on the global stage. So we're excited to be joined tonight by Kaytlyn Gerbin, who will be coming to us live from Lisbon. And so the time difference, it's very late for her. It is a little bit earlier for us. So we're cool doing it at 4 p.m. She's about to go to sleep. So we're going to try to make the show happen.
We'll just try and keep her awake.
I am not the only person here. Kaytlyn is not the only person that will be joining us in a second. But there's also, if you haven't noticed...
Hi, you guys. Hi.
We both have sun across our face.
I was just realizing that I also have it.
I mean, I don't mind it because this is the first time we've seen sun in 6 years. Is that right? No, is that not right?
I think it's 7. I think it's 7.
In the Pacific Northwest, you take it when you can get it. So I'll soak it in. But sorry.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us a little bit early on this wonderful sunny Monday. If you're new to Ginger Runner Live, welcome. We are live. Kaytlyn will be joining us in just a second, but because we are live, you can ask questions to our guest.
Yeah.
So ask your questions in the chat room. I'll be keeping my eyes in there.
Yeah, you already have a couple questions pulled aside. So if you have questions for our guest tonight about Transgrancanaria, the Coastal Challenge, anything with training, anything, ask them in the chat room. We'll get those to her.
We already have a great question from Ellie Gerbin in the chat room, which we'll ask Kaytlyn once we're live.
In case you don't know, Ellie is Kaytlyn's husband, and that's going to be fun because Kaytlyn just informed us that her and her husband have not had much chance to communicate because of all the traveling and time differences. So this might be the only time they get a chat today. So we're going to make it happen during the live show. Before we introduce our wonderful guests tonight, of course, we have some individuals that we like to thank at the top of every Ginger Runner Live episode. Those are our Patreon crew members. It is because of them that we're able to do live shows every Monday, do all of our reviews, all of our films. We just dropped the Orcas Trail Camp video this last weekend. Kim will also be dropping hers this week. So it is because of the Patreon supporters that we're able to do this full time. So big shout out to them. Two individuals in particular at that top tier. Chris Lee out of Hong Kong. His organization Trailblazer showcases the incredible trails that Hong Kong has to offer. They just donated a huge amount of money and food to a local charity as well there. So he's just doing amazing things in that region. So big shout out to Chris Lee. And Brian Sands. Brian Sands has been a longtime supporter of the show, has an amazing fitness journey of his own, inspiring multiple people, losing over 100 pounds, training and running his first marathon, 50K. He's just an amazing human. So we like to thank those individuals at the top of the show for their incredible support of everything that we do here. Without further ado, our guest comes to us from another country. That is
not this one.
Not this one. She's an amazing ultra runner that does reside here in the Pacific Northwest. So we are so proud to call her a friend and also a local runner out of Washington State who just made one of the biggest splashes on the international trail running scene by winning Transgrancanaria and setting a course record. Without further ado, Kaytlyn Gerbin.
Yay!
Okay, that's it.
I was like, oh no, we lost audio.
And I was like, nope, she's just waving. She's doing the...
I'm just awkward.
Yeah, it's the parade wave. First,
it's so funny to be talking to you guys like from across the world because normally I like live so close. So I feel like I should just like transport myself to be like in your studio. It feels weird that I'm like really far away.
I know every time we have you on the show, you're usually coming to us from your place, which is 20 minutes from us. And it's always funny, like, why don't we all just get in the same room and do this? But today, you are traveling abroad for a number of weeks. How has this been? Because you've been traveling a ton in the last like month and a half or so.
Yeah.
How's your body holding up?
Body is holding up well. I mean, I definitely feel super fortunate that I've been able to have the opportunity to travel so much this last month. It's been awesome. And I'm trying to take advantage of every second of it that I have. And fortunately, I've been able to get to the sun a lot, which, as you guys know, you're just spent like a long time enjoying the sunshine on your faces. And I can see how excited you are about it. So maybe I can bring a little bit back of that with me. So I'm actually like on my way back to the US, but I'm traveling with my friend who came out to crew with me. And we had a layover in Lisbon, and we decided to extend the layover for 2 days so we can eat some good food and drink some good wine here before we make it back to the rainy Northwest.
Hopefully not rainy. Hopefully this sticks around.
I ran in shorts yesterday, and I was telling Ethan that I was doing my best to get a tan on my legs. And you're like, where were you getting a tan? There was sun yesterday. I saw it.
And this is Washington State saying, congratulations, Kaytlyn. We're happy.
Thank you, Washington.
Let's start a little bit further back from Transgrancanaria. So you've had a pretty damn successful last like 6 to 8 months. Last we had you on was with Alex Borsuk regarding the Infinity Loop around Rainier, which was a harrowing yet adventurous expedition that you two took on and did some pretty incredible things out there on the mountain. If you haven't heard that episode, go back and listen. You'll be inspired. But since then, a lot has happened. New sponsors. You've been racing a ton. First, let's go back to Coastal Challenge. When did that spark your desire to run it? Because it's a lot of traveling. It's a multi-stage race. Yeah. It's a bit different.
Yeah, so I have been, like, the Coastal Challenge has been on my mind for a while, and that's because, so a few good friends in the running community up in British Columbia, so a few friends of mine have kind of been going down there, so Hillary and Haley that I see up in Squamish and stuff, and I was actually running up at Wham, which you guys were up at. And I ran the 55K there. My husband ran the 100-miler, and Kim, I know you ran the 110. And so I was talking to Hillary and Haley up there, that was back in September. And they were kind of mentioning like, oh yeah, we're getting ready for the Coastal Challenge and trying to find runners for that. And so that really kind of like sparked my interest in that. Oh, maybe this is something I could actually do next year. I might be able to make that travel work out. Let's see if we can make that happen. And so that discussion kind of started way back in the fall before I had anything else in my season figured out. And I figured it would be a really cool way to open up the season. I've never done a stage race before, so I was really intrigued by that. Costa Rica seemed amazing. I never had a chance to travel there, so that seemed like a really cool opportunity. And I also really liked the idea, like, because it was a stage race, you have 6 days of running in a row and 6 individual races that all matter, but they're all different. And every single day you're lining up at a starting line. And I think like race anxiety is a real thing, and it also is like kind of bizarre, like going so many months in between big races and then showing up at a race and needing to just be used to what it's like to stand on a starting line. So I thought like, oh, that might be a really cool like way to just like get those nerves out of the way early in the season, where like, okay, 6 days in a row, you just wake up. It doesn't matter how tired you are, how awful you feel, how much your feet hurt. You're on the starting line and you got to figure out how to do this race today. So that was a pretty cool experience. So I'm really glad I got to do that.
It sounds like a unique experience because racing 6 days in a row, it's a different sort of mindset, right? So in that scenario, are you at the level that you run? Obviously, you want to win, or you're showing up hoping to perform well. Are you looking at the full picture? Or are you taking it day by day? So I know today I've got 20 miles. I'm going to push it as hard as I can. Or is it like, I got to save a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of both. And it kind of, as the week shook out, I kind of had a better idea of like what my effort should be on different sections and different days. And especially like as I could see how the competition and stuff was playing out. But, you know, it is an individual race every day. So that does matter, but it's your cumulative time that gets added up over the whole time. And basically, so everyone starts at the same time. You all run the same course, and then your finish time is recorded, and then you have the rest of the day to basically focus on recovery. And so they had different camps that got relocated every night. So we like stayed, except for the last 2 nights, we stayed in a different spot every night, and they had food and it was sun, and oftentimes we were either on the beach or in the middle of the jungle, and we could kind of hang out near the finish line. I like to hang out there and kind of cheer for other runners coming through. But then I was also like laying with my feet up a palm tree, trying to get them to like get some blood circulation, and just kind of relax and refresh. And so yeah, it's a different dynamic. And I will say like the men's race was super interesting and really intense. And Cody Lind, another American runner, had a great race there and ended up pulling off for the win. But I think the men's race played out quite a bit differently than the women's race. Just in that the men, I think, because of how tightly they were running together every day, they were really pushing each other every single day. It was a race. And so that seemed really intense. So I was like, you know, I think a lot of it just depends on the race and the day and how everyone's running. And I can't say that like going back to another stage race, I would have the exact same experience, because I think there's just so much that can happen in that many with that many miles to run. And, you know, the heat is a new factor too. So everyone's kind of battling that. So yeah, there's a lot of different things to kind of take into consideration.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about using the Coastal Challenge as a trainer for Transgrancanaria, if that was the purpose, and then beyond. We'll talk a little bit about that in today's show. But of course, we are live with Kaytlyn Gerbin, fresh off of her big win at Transgrancanaria. If you have a question for her, drop into the chat and let us know. Kim, you've got a couple pulled aside.
Yeah, Jeff is asking, Kaytlyn, how are you fueling for a 6-day stage race?
So normally my fueling during races of pretty much any distance is I like to use a lot of gels and liquid calories. So I work with goo, and so I have some of my like favorite goos that I always bring along. And then fortunately, I mean, I love watermelon, and Costa Rica has a lot of fresh fruits. They had a lot of watermelon. So basically throughout the day of the racing, I was just kind of feeling like I normally would during a race. But then as soon as I finished the race, I was making sure I brought kind of my own like protein recovery shake so I could get some easy calories in, because it's so hot, and so it's a little bit hard to like get real solid food in immediately after. So I was always trying to make sure I was like self-sufficient, had something that I could get some calories in right away. But then they had kind of buffet style lunches and dinners, and so the key was just like to get, I think, eat as much as you can. Although I wasn't really sure about like how, if I should try to change the kind of food I was eating during the week, because like you're trying to recover after a big effort, but you also are racing again the next day. And so something like, I normally eat a lot, like I love fresh veggies, but I try to avoid salads and stuff like the day before a race. And so I was a little hesitant to do a lot of like salads in the week of racing in the heat. So
Right.
I mostly stuck to a lot of like rice and beans and meat and stuff that they had available with the race, and then a lot of fresh fruit.
Was it similar in Transgrancanaria, or did you have to sort of change the palate as well? Just different countries, different climates, different availability of foods?
Um, no, I mean, I generally stick with the same kind of like mid-race fueling plan. The thing that's a little bit different about Transgran Canaria that I'm still kind of trying to figure out with the European races is that most of them start in the evening. And so this one started at 11 p.m. So then there's kind of a different dynamic of figuring out what do you eat that whole day leading up to the race when you're about to race at 11 p.m. that night.
Right.
When should you be eating your lunch and dinner? What kind of food? And then because you're starting at a different time, you're not really eating like that breakfast. So you just get hungry at different times. So I think that's still probably something I could always work on a little bit more. But yeah, generally try to just keep it simple.
Just shout out. We have some live viewers from across the globe tonight because of the earlier time. We have Roke from Slovenia, which is pretty cool. I love being able to do a little bit earlier episodes just because we do get such a global audience tonight. So welcome, everyone, if you're not a regular viewer because of time. But let's get to one more live question, and then we'll start digging in.
Yeah, great question from Deb in the chat room. Deb says, Kaytlyn, as the miles continue to pile on each day, does the race get harder, or mentally does the race get easier as you get closer to the overall finish?
So yeah, I think a little bit of both, and it kind of depended on whether you were in a high or a low point during the race. So I think she's talking about the coastal challenge where you just have multiple days of running in a row. And so each day kind of had its own unique challenge, and the terrain is so different for all the days. And so there were some days that kind of regardless of where they were in the week, I was a little more nervous about than others just because of the kind of terrain we would be on and how different it was from something I was used to experiencing. But I think like your body does adapt. It's really amazing what you can do when you get on the starting line day 2 and everyone's is hurting, everyone's sore, everyone's hot already, and it's 6 a.m. And then you just start moving, and I think most people would say that probably by about the third day, actually it seemed like, okay, you know what, like my body is used to this rhythm. It's used to like getting up and running even when I'm tired, and it's a little bit more used to the heat. I'm able to get more food in. And so, yeah, I wouldn't say it necessarily gets easier, but the miles don't stack on quite as much as I think you think they would.
I kind of remember that from Squamish 50-50, and I know you've done well. It's a 50-50 as well. It's different than what you think. You think the cumulative miles is going to damage you in a certain way because after you feel after 100 or 50 mile or something like that. But it's interesting how your body does adapt. It's a good conversation for a future episode, I think. I do want to talk about, you mentioned scheduling your year, and after last year, you obviously did very well at Western States. You've done very well there multiple times. Planning your year out in 2020, did you have an idea of the races that you wanted to go back to, races that you decided to sort of shift schedules around? Like it seems like you have come into 2020 with a plan, and what is that plan? Is there big things on the horizon or big projects, or what's the Kaytlyn moving forward?
Yeah. So yes, I have had a plan, but it also is a constantly evolving plan. And so maybe I've had like 10 different plans. So my current plan is still like a little bit up in the air. But so like I said, I had talked to some of my Canadian friends about getting down to Costa Rica. That was earlier in the fall. And so I knew Coastal Challenge was happening. Doing Transgrancanaria was always kind of in the back of my mind as a race that I really wanted to go back to. And we can get into this a little bit more when we're talking about the race specifically, but I did the race last year. And for a number of different reasons, I kind of like really wanted to be able to go back and have another shot at that race. And then I really want to do UTMB this year. So I've signed up for UTMB. And that's another kind of big focus race of mine. But another thing, I know we've talked about this a little bit before, but I also really enjoy other things in the mountains that aren't just racing. And I feel like a lot of years in the past, because of my racing schedule, I've had to cut out a lot of other things that I really enjoy doing in the mountains, such as just getting out and adventuring and doing more mountaineering and kind of spring volcano adventures in the Northwest. And so I kind of have tried to take an untraditional, I guess, approach to what my year is going to look like, which is I have kind of like my spring races that I'm doing, and then I've got my summer and fall things, and some of those things are still evolving, but I'm kind of trying to specifically make some space in my calendar this year for actually getting out on adventures when I don't need to focus on getting really focused training for a race. And so I'm hoping that kind of May and June I can take to do a little bit more fun stuff in the mountains.
I remember that actually from last year. Yeah, like during May and June, you were in such training mode for states that I think you even mentioned to us out on the trail at some point not being able to go on this adventure to Summit of Volcano or Shucksin or something like that. I remember like your schedule being specific to the event that was coming up, and you couldn't have the freedom. I remember you just like, I want the freedom to be able to go on this adventure for the next 4 days, and I got to stay home and do 25 and 20, you know, like the back-to-back specific training. That's interesting.
Yeah, but I guess to be honest, I probably did complain about that, but I actually did drop a lot of those long runs and go on those adventures. Like I did climb a lot of those things, but and I think you can make that work, but it's always a little bit of a balance. And I think for me, a lot of it is about keeping things fun. And I love racing and I love trading, but I also love doing other things in the mountains. And I think like it's easy to get in the habit of doing the same races or the races that you think people expect you to do, because that's just kind of like what the top races are. And especially especially like for me, Western States, like I love that race. It's been such an awesome opportunity to be able to go and run there. I feel really fortunate I've been able to run there 3 years in a row. Like I think that's amazing. And I do still want to be able to keep going back to that race, but maybe it's time for me to take a break from that this year. And so I'm not running Western States this year. I'm hoping to go down and help crew and pace another local runner. But, you know, I'm excited to be able to have my May and June that's not focused on doing kind of fast runnable training for states, where I can get out and have some other different kind of adventures too.
Sweet. We're getting tons of great live questions, so let's get to some of those, and then we'll dive into Transgrancanaria. I've been dying to hear about it, so go ahead.
This question comes from your husband, but we also had another person in the chat room ask a very similar question. Ellie asked, in brackets, he says, serious question. Can you share what kind of precaution you've taken during your travels given the COVID-19 insanity? What's it been like? And we've had another question about that as well, if there's been any, you know, restrictions with your travel or any changes you've made.
Yep. So I normally do try to do some level of this, but I've definitely like heightened it to the max, which is just making sure I am washing my hands really well, much more than, you know, I mean, basically anytime I'm touching anything in public that I can't sanitize myself, I've just been washing my hands, making sure I'm not touching my face. I'm washing my hands before I eat food, you know, kind of like the basic stuff that CDC recommends. But I also always, I've had like a little hand sanitizer thing, you know how they have those kind of corny little like clips that clip onto things. I like had it clipped to my bag and accessible at all times. So I've like just been like using that like crazy. And then also I like Clorox wipe down my plane seat. and the trays and the seatbelt and everything I touch. So like, and I offer them to all my seatmates, and almost everybody says yes. Some people say no, and that's really weird, but
no, I do not want a seat that is sanitized. I like the germs.
yeah. Yeah, but I mean, I think it's a serious concern, and I know that, I mean, especially back in Seattle, you guys are dealing with a lot of repercussions from that, and a lot of offices shutting down, and major events being canceled and stuff. And I'm we're seeing that even with trail races starting to get canceled and changed. And I have some other upcoming travel that is likely getting canceled as a result of this. So I think those are all fair precautions. I definitely thought about that. But I think that, it's, for me, it was an appropriate choice to go and travel out here. And I just feel like I can keep myself, from just using kind of basic hygiene and making sure I'm not going to any malls, which I never go to malls anyway, or eating at a big buffets where people are touching everything. So,
right. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and the situation's been so fluid. So probably when you left Seattle, the situation was very different than it is today.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, just days difference.
Yeah.
Was there any announcements at Transgrancanaria or anything like that they mention any additional steps that they were utilizing to? Did they even address it, I guess? Or was it a little too early?
I can't. So I don't want to speak on behalf of the race because I don't actually know.
No,
I wasn't really involved in that, but I did notice like they had hand sanitizer at aid stations, and the volunteers who were handling food had gloves on. And I don't recall. I don't actually usually grab much stuff from the aid station, so I'm not sure if that's like a normal thing, a standard thing that they do all the time or not.
Sure.
But I think runners in general were definitely. I saw a lot of hand sanitizer and things. So I think people are just being cautious. But yeah, I mean, there was an outbreak on one of the islands in the Canary Island chain, but at least Gran Canaria hadn't had any cases.
I want to start digging into this race because I know that you ran there last year. You were sick, I believe, when you raced last year, and you still managed to do incredibly well. But after last year's race, you mentioned a little bit earlier, were you determined to come back and win? Were you determined to come back and be healthy? Like, what was the goal with coming back to Transgrancanaria?
Yeah. So the goal for me was really that I knew that I could have a better, for myself, a better race experience and a better performance there. And I know, there are a lot of ways to measure that. And of course, it would be awesome to win. Of course, it'd be awesome to run a faster time. But it almost all of those things were kind of secondary. I just knew that on this course, on this kind of terrain, I knew that I could do better than the experience that I had last year. And I wanted to give myself a chance to come back and do that for myself. And so there are a number of things last year. It was actually almost kind of a comical list of all these things that happened to me last year on my race. It was I'd done the World Championships in Spain 2 years ago. So that was technically my first European international race. But that also is a very different level of support. You're with a team. There's a whole crew of people, and I almost don't count that. So Transgrancanaria last year was my first real international race. I found out I got in through the Ultra Trail World Tour, which was an awesome opportunity, but that was pretty last minute notice. So I had about 2 months, I think, to prepare for that. Mm-hmm. I went by myself, so I had no one to help crew or anything, and I was totally fine with that until I realized that there's only one place to have a drop bag, and it's at mile 50. And the Transgrancanaria course basically climbs up, weaves its way up and down, but you're making your way up to the high point of the island. So by the time you hit mile 50, you've covered 17,000 feet of climbing. So it's a self-supported 50 mile with 17,000 feet of climbing with all of your mandatory gear and all of that food and everything. So it was a lot of stuff to carry. So that was difficult. I also had crazy travel schedule to get out there, and there are a lot of things that factored into that, which is kind of another story. But bottom line is I ended up not wanting to check a bag because I had so many tight connections in tiny airports that I was like, for sure I was going to lose the bag. I was showing up right before the race, so I didn't have any leeway. So I didn't bring poles. I didn't bring a lot of the other stuff I would like kind of normally have for myself, just because I was trying to travel light. And I also, probably because I had that crazy travel schedule, I got really sick. And I got sick like right before the race started, and couldn't breathe very well, couldn't push on the climb. So basically, like, what else? I had gear issues. I'd never run a night start before. So I've run races that I would run through the night at the end of hundreds, but I've also had crew, so I can get like different headlamps and batteries and stuff every few hours. And this race starts at 11 p.m. So the majority of the race, I was actually running overnight in the dark. And so that was an interesting thing. So it's just like almost like everything that could have possibly like gone wrong for me was like a challenge. And it was a great experience because I was forced to just problem solve and, kind of reevaluate my race plan and kind of step back and be like, okay, I can either basically be disappointed for hours about how I'm not moving the way I want to be moving, or I can kind of make a new plan, just like approach something a little bit differently and just go from there. And so that was a really good experience. I think I learned a lot about myself through that. And because of that, I was able to turn the race around, and I ran into second place, and I was really proud with that finish, especially given the day I had. But it also almost felt a little weird for me because it was my first real like international race like that, and I got on the podium, and I think that was, I mean, I'm super proud of that performance, but it also was like, it didn't feel like a Kaytlyn race. It didn't feel like the race I knew I could have. And so for a lot of people interviewing me or talking to me afterwards, just like, wow, it's such an amazing race. And it's like, I don't want to say like, oh no, actually it was a terrible race, but like, for me, it's like, I kind of, ever since that, I've wanted to be able to go back and just like see what I could do on the course. And so that was really my goal with going back this year. And I had a lot of energy just kind of built up over the last year to try to go back and see what I could do on the course.
I obviously think that was a good decision, knowing the end result. But let's start at the very beginning of this year's race, the start line. You just brought up a photo on your laptop, which
I did. Something that I wanted to ask about as well. So the photo I was just looking at, Ethan just referenced, was something that I thought was fantastic and amazing and really powerful to see. Was at the start of the race, they actually had all the women up front. Was that something that the race organizers implemented? Was it something you ladies put together? Can you talk about that a little bit?
No, the race did this, and this was so awesome. And I like really want more races to do this, and I hope that it starts more of a trend because so the theme for their race this year was Trail is Female. And I'm not sure like what the motivation was behind that, whatever, but it was awesome. They did a really good job trying to recruit top women to run the race this year because of that. I think they had almost half of the women, or half of the race field was women, or I think whatever they did, they tried to help incentivize more women to sign up for the race. And they changed the logo for the sign, or for kind of the race logo, so they had a woman standing instead of a man, which was like a nice little gesture. But then at the start, they brought the women up in front to get a photo, and then they told us like because normally these starting corral, especially in these European races, there's so many people and everyone's packed so tight, and there's this huge corral with just lined with photographers and fans and media, but the women are always behind because the elite guys are in the front to start. And so they brought the women up and asked us, hey, we want a photo with all of the women. So everyone goes up and everyone stands there, and then we finish the photos and everyone kind of starts to like kind of drift back into the crowd, and they're like, no, you stay, like women are in the front. And that, I mean, I think it was like almost everyone felt a little awkward, like, oh no, like all the guys are going to be pissed because they're going to have to run around us and whatever, which is like kind of nonsense. It's fine. It was so awesome. And I think if you look at some of the photos of us starting, like the look on everyone's face is just like this like moment of glee. We're like, this is what it's like to like start a race and just see like this stream of people and crowds and photographers just like there to get that shot of the start of the race, and to have the banner drop and just get off and start running with an open field in front of you where you're not staring at the feet of everyone you're trying to not trip over. Like that was just such an amazing, powerful, and energizing experience. And I mean, it makes me really excited that I had that experience, but it also kind of makes me sad that I didn't even know what that was like. And I'm just thinking of how many other top women runners who have never had that experience before. And I hope that it's something that maybe starts a little bit more of a trend. And I didn't actually talk to any of the guys about it afterwards, but I mean, their times were all fine. I think they did okay.
Yeah.
Like, I don't
Yeah.
think it like, really threw them off too much to like move around us. And actually, a lot of us women finished in the top 20 overall anyway. So probably it was okay that we started up there.
It was such a cool photo, and I don't think it was something that I don't think I had really acknowledged until you see it, and you kind of go, "This is an image that you just don't see," and it was really neat to see the women at the front, you, Casey, all the international runners and stuff like that. It was such a, I don't know, it was a really cool thing.
And Kaytlyn, you mentioned like, and the photos from the first little bit of the race as well, just seeing the women, and everyone was just like, the look on their face, like you could really feel the energy and the excitement. It was really cool. Really, really cool.
Yeah.
I want to dig into how this race played out. So you mentioned last year, you talked a bit about how it didn't play out to Kaytlyn's full potential. You didn't feel like it was a Kaytlyn race. What made the first, you talk about the first 50 miles, 17,000 feet of climbing. How did that feel for you this year? Being healthy, I'm assuming healthy at the start line, and having just sort of the legs underneath you that were ready to race that day.
Yeah. It was a good feeling. I mean, I felt it wasn't easy. So I'd be lying if I said it just all came natural. Like I was definitely digging deep in a lot of places. I had a lot of awesome highs, but also some lows, and that just kind of comes and goes as you ebb and flow through terrain, and especially racing in a field, and with the kind of international level of competition that there was in this field, there were a lot of other factors that I was trying to figure out about how much should I push at the beginning to try to stay with setting the pace up front versus kind of run my own race. And there's always this kind of balance that I'm still definitely trying to figure out about how much do you run your own race and how much do you kind of hang with some of the other women. And so there were times, pushing a little bit more uncomfortable than others. But in general, I felt like I was in control of the race I was running. I felt strong. I felt like I was, feeling good on climbs. And it's also a really cool feeling. Sometimes I go to a race you run before and like, I didn't run up this climb last year. I know I was not going this fast last year. So, when there's little moments like that, or even like coming through towns that you recognize and seeing kind of familiar spots, it's always kind of like a good mental boost. And I mentioned too that I had a friend, my friend Sam, that came out to help crew me this year, and that was just such a lifesaver. Like made such a big difference for me because just having, first of all, having someone to help just kind of get you in and out of the aid stations a little bit faster makes a big difference. But also having someone who could give me a little bit of information about where people were. That's something that I think is really valuable in a tight race, just to kind of have some sort of gauge about how far ahead or behind certain people are from you. So I felt like I was kind of able to balance kind of running the splits that I was hoping to hit that day, but then also kind of stay in a good position early on in the race.
It was honestly one of the more exciting races to follow on social media, at least in a long time, because, one, it's overnight, and it's even overnight here. So we were up late, like kind of following things as they were playing out. It seemed like there was a pretty strong group of females in that lead pack, and you were all pretty close. Like the men's field seemed to sort of break apart early on, and Pau Capel and people were like putting pretty big gaps on third, fourth, eighth place. With the women, it was all pretty tight. You were only separated by a few minutes. Did you know that the race was on? Were you being patient for a first bit? Like, when did the race legs start taking over and that mindset?
Yeah. So early on, like right at the very start, I actually had predicted this. Like Audrey Tanguy, a really strong French runner who I met at Madeira last year. Her and Asara Garcia, Spanish runner, also total badass. They both set the pace out really strong at the beginning. And I actually kind of tailored my pace a little bit so that I could keep a little bit of a closer distance behind them. But they were running fast. And so kind of coming through, like, I kind of knew what my splits were, or what I was hoping my splits could be kind of for the main checkpoints, and came into the first checkpoint a few minutes under that split. And I was like, okay, those other girls are ahead of me. I know they're only a few minutes ahead, but like it's too early in the race for me to push any faster than this. I'm just going to keep, stay consistent on what I think I can run. And at that point, I actually didn't have much of an idea about how close behind anyone else was behind me, except for Mimi Kotka. Because we kind of kept getting glances of each other, and a few times we're in aid stations kind of coming, I would be coming out and get a glance of her coming in, and we kind of say hi, and then so that happened a few times. So I knew she was pretty close behind me for a while, and I just, knowing the other women who were running the race, I just assumed that they were like right there. So it was kind of a cool feeling to know that, like, I knew we were running splits that were the fastest splits that have been, recorded on some of these sections, and all of us were right there. Like that's such a cool, cool feeling. But it's also like, for me, like, that was way too early to really race.
Sure.
And so I figured, I'm like, okay, I'll let Asara and Audrey, push the pace up front. I'm going to try to make sure I can stay, within, 10 minutes or whatever of them if possible. But again, like, it's dark and we're on really crazy terrain a lot of times, and it's variable. And there's some sections, like, one thing I really like about this course is that there are sections that are really runnable, or some really steep technical descents or really steep long climbs. And so there's just so much variation in between every checkpoint. And because of that, like, every runner is going to have their own strengths. And so I think it's really hard to try to, like, run someone else's race on a course like that.
Right.
And so I didn't know what Audrey and Asara were doing ahead of me. I just knew kind of what I could do, and I ended up kind of keeping a relatively even split behind them. And at some point, I think it was at the Art Nara aid station, which I believe is around mile, I might be mixing this up, but I want to say it was 39.
Yeah, I was going to say around mile 40. That's
I hit it.
For us, it got really exciting, but I'll let you keep going.
Yeah. Okay, so it was around mile 39 or so. So I came into that aid station, and my friend Sam was like, okay, she's just a few minutes ahead of you. And I was like, what do you mean she? Like, there's two girls up there, right? And she's like, no, like, I only saw Asara. And so I actually hadn't seen Audrey, so I'm not actually sure what happened, but I must have passed her either at an aid station or something, because I thought she was still up ahead of me. And so at that point, then I knew, I'm like, okay, like, I'm just a few minutes behind the Spanish runner, and I know she's a really strong runner, and we're only halfway through the race, and so there's still a lot that can happen. And again, at that point, I still didn't have any idea how far behind any of the other women were, but again, knowing how strong all these runners are, I just figured, everyone's trying to checkmate the next person ahead of them. So right. I was trying not to be worried about what was going on behind me, and just know that if someone was going to catch me, hopefully I would have the strength to kind of run with them for a while, and we could work together as best as possible. But so I came in then, I hit sunrise as I was getting up from the climb. There's a big climb between Art and Nara, and you get up to this high point, Cruz de Tejeda, which is just a beautiful part in the course, where you're kind of like at this crux of the island, where you can see the ocean to the north, you can see the ocean to the south, you can see Roque Nublo, which is the really iconic big kind of tower rock that we go to later in the course. And then down below, there's these beautiful little kind of Spanish towns just hidden into the cliffside. So it's just amazing. And actually, that's where I went. I had 2 days before the race stuff all started, and I went and stayed by myself in a hostel kind of over there. And so I kind of felt like that was my place, because I had explored that area a little bit before, and I was coming up to that right during sunrise. And I has stopped a few times just to like take it all in, because it was just so amazing. And at that point, like, I was feeling strong. I felt like I was having was having a good race. I was having a good experience. And, it didn't really matter like where I was in the package. It's just like, I'm so glad I'm here. Like, I'm glad I came back to this race. I knew this is like what I wanted to do. So that was great. And I basically, from that point, then you descend quite a ways down into Tejeda. And then again, too, I got in and I was told I was like a few minutes behind Azara. So basically, we had been running the same exact splits for the last kind of 20 miles or so, it seemed. And there's a big climb, about 3,000 foot climb out of that goes up to Roca Nublo. And this point, there's a pretty tight out and back section, only a few minutes long, but it's on like this most scenic part. And people, if they've seen photos from the course, probably have seen photos of this section because there's a ton of photographers that hang out around there. A lot of people come up like just after sunrise. It's really pretty. And so it was right at that point then that we are going up these switchbacks to get to the out and back, where I finally saw her, and she looks down the switchbacks and can see me. So we're like, okay, there we are. But it was really awesome. Like when I ended up catching her, we kind of were just like, okay, like let's go, let's do this. We both were running under the course record time, and I'm like, this is awesome. Like let's like at that point you still have 30 miles to go. That's a long ways to go. And so we were running together, and we ran together for a while, basically until we got broken up at the next aid station. She had crew, I didn't. There was also a marathon distance race that was starting right from that point. And we were getting up to that aid station, and the marathon distance was just starting, and there were like 2,000 runners.
Oh man.
That was, if I had known, like I would have run a little bit harder just to get, like if I had gotten in there 5 minutes earlier, I would have been ahead of all of those runners. But instead we started at the back and had to pass thousands of runners on single track technical climbs. It was a little bit of a nightmare. And so clearly we lost contact with each other during that point. But we ended up reconnecting and working together to pass some people. But it was just a little bit of a mess. And I was kind of going down, and I actually thought she was right with me because I could hear people, but I think it was a marathon runner who had kind of just like stuck with me to pass people and not her. But it was just so hard then at that point to know where she was. But anyway, she's awesome. It was really fun to be able to work together for a little bit and kind of push on the course, because I knew we were both running a really strong race. And so it was fun to be able to have that shared experience a little bit together too.
There was a moment again, following on social media, where they have really good tracking. Not only are they kind of giving you splits as runners come into aid stations and stuff, but they have a predicted GPS location. And it was really fun to sort of see, based off of splits and speed, where they predicted GPS signals to sort of be, every couple of seconds and stuff. And there were moments where, Kaytlyn was ahead of Azara, and then Azara would jump ahead of Kaytlyn, and we're just kind of sitting there going, oh, wait, is she in first? What's going on? But you took I believe it was a 12-minute gap, and took it down to, you passed her and you got it down to like a minute in the course of 10 to 13K or something like that. In like 6 or 7 miles, you basically shrunk an 11-minute lead. And when we heard that, it was kind of one of those moments of, oh man, if Kaytlyn is moving like that in 13K, taking 10 minutes off, like that's a Kaytlyn you don't want to be in front of, because it's like coming through, dominating, and it's going to be fun to follow. So we're talking about the marathoners and stuff running. Those last miles of this race are downhill, and I don't know the course very well, but I'm assuming technical, because this mountain is just crazy and craggy and stuff. Does it play to your strengths? Do you consider yourself a really strong technical downhill runner, being from the Northwest, or is it, do you hold back? Like, how did that feel those last few miles? Because it gets dicey.
Yeah. Again, like the terrain is so variable. So there are sections of it where it's really technical, steep, kind of loose dirt, rocky descents. And then other sections where it's a little bit more runnable and you can really crank. And then again, other sections where you're on a single track, but it is super rocky. And so you're just kind of like watching your step every once in a while. I think even at that point, there were so many people on the course. So I think that was it was a little hard to find a groove, because you are either kind of in the back of a train of people or trying to pass them. And then I mean, everyone has this experience during races, but it's just sometimes hard to know, like, it's hard to dial in your own pace when you're kind of trying to leapfrog with people and figure out, should I actually pass them? We're kind of running the same pace. I don't know. And then, I'm also tired. They're fresh. And it's also like, I'd just been passing so many people that I was kind of sick of asking to pass in multiple languages. So that I just would stick behind. But the other, so the last 30 miles of this race is tougher, I think, than it looks, because it is a big descent. You drop from the high point down back to the beach. But at the same time, there are quite a few punchy climbs that are bigger than they look. And if you look at the course profile, they look so tiny. But like, that's just because like there's so much elevation gain in the whole course that everything's shrunk down. So there were some pretty decent climbs through there. And it also gets really hot because you're on the drier side of the island. And at that point, the sun is kind of baking down on you, and you're in just kind of like weaving in and out of these canyons, and there's no shade and anything. So there's a lot of different kind of factors, I think, that go into play there. And so, you kind of try to push, but I think that last bit is harder and lasts longer than you think it does.
I can't imagine what it must have felt like to come across that finish line first, under course record time. How did it feel? I know that we're getting toward the end of the show here. We'll probably get one more live question. Maybe we'll save this for the after show. But I just want to know what this experience was like for you, crossing that finish line, knowing that you've had such a successful year so far, being able to put last year's experience there behind you. Did you feel like Kaytlyn had the Kaytlyn race?
Yeah, I was super stoked. I mean, I'm still gleaming from it. I feel like I've been really close to having a really good race and pull something together like this. But I think I respect all the women who I was racing against. And I think there's some really dominant crushers. And so to be able to toe the line and have a really strong but hard race when everyone was pushing each other, I think we all, especially with Fujao and our Asara, I mean, we finished within, I think, 15 minutes of each other. And that's crazy on that kind of a course. So it was a really good feeling to be able to feel like I fought through some low points and stuff and was able to cross there. And the energy at the finish line there was just awesome. So I'm kind of on cloud nine from it.
A huge congratulations to our guest tonight, Kaytlyn Gerbin, on absolutely crushing the Transgrancanaria course, setting a new course record, placing top 20, multiple women placed top 20 there too, overall, which is just dominant. This is going to be a super exciting year in this sport, and following Kaytlyn's been one of the highlights for sure. And we know that the year's just getting started. So Kaytlyn, all the best and good luck to you on this year. Obviously, we know you and we live 20 minutes away, so expect many Midwestern hellos. Yeah, we're going to be at your house waiting for you to get home. We can't wait to buy you a beer and celebrate. Yeah, with beer. Can you remind people where they can find you on social media? Because I know we do have a bunch of questions that didn't get asked during the show. We'll ask those in our after show. Yeah. But if you'd like to follow Kaytlyn, where can they find you and show you some love?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, and it's at Kaytlyn_G. And my name's spelt a little funky with Y's, but people can find it.
We've got it right at the lower end of the screen there. They can see it. Yeah,
good. I'm also on Facebook, but not as active on that. Twitter as well. And I also am on Strava, and I have all of my training open in public. If anyone wants to poke around or ask me questions about things that I'm doing, I'm happy to answer questions.
Go follow Kaytlyn. It is worth it. She's a fantastic athlete and human. And the last few years have been awesome to follow her. This is a big year. Like, you can already tell things are going great. And it's just like so exciting. Yes. It's so exciting to see someone from the Northwest just showcasing. Yeah, just crushing it. So big thank you to our wonderful guest tonight, Kaytlyn Gerbin, for taking some time while she's in Lisbon and traveling to spend a little bit with us on tonight's show. So yeah, just show her some love. Before we wrap up the show, I want to remind everyone that we do have an after show. It is with our guest tonight. We'll have Kaytlyn, and it is a Patreon exclusive perk. So if you haven't already, consider it. Go to patreon.com/thegingerrunner for as little as $1 a month, which is obviously a fraction of a cup of coffee. It supports us, but it also gets you access to tonight's after show and every after show previous. So they're all archived there. You can all go watch them. Some questions that get asked are really, really great. We got tons here about the race, gear, all that stuff. But before we wrap up this main show, we do have one last segment that we'd like to do. It's called our GR Crew Member of the Week, where we get to highlight a member of our community who goes above and beyond, goes out there, crushes it. We like to highlight them, congratulate them, and celebrate them. So Kim, who is this week's GR Crew Member?
This week's GR Crew Member, this was a fun one. It stuck out to me, and I actually had to like dig around a little bit to learn more about this. It just sounded so fun. So the GR Crew Member of the Week is Andrew Gray. Andrew writes in to say, I got in my longest run ever, 40-miler option at the 100 Ks of Convenience in Davenport. An interesting race as it's all on sidewalks and bike paths through the city. The course is unmarked, and you get a map with turn-by-turn directions the day of. Aid stations were 4 gas stations you had to stop at to buy something and bring the receipts back to show that you ran the loop. If you could cut corners or through parking lots, you can. The 40-miler was 2 loops. So congratulations, Andrew. I thought it was such a fun and interesting
What a cool experience. Having to
race idea.
Using convenience stores for your aid stations. It's fantastic. Yeah. Congratulations, Andrew, on running 40 miles and in a very unique fashion. Sounds like a blast. So it's the 100 Ks of Convenience in Davenport. Put it on your list. A lot of 7-Elevens visited in that one. A big thank you to everyone who's tuning into tonight's live show. We'll see you next week for Ginger Runner Live episode number 299, the last episode of the 200s, which will be coming at you next Monday. Thanks again to our guest tonight, Kaytlyn Gerbin. Go show her some love on social. We are going to join her in the after show in just a couple of seconds. Regardless, get out there, everyone. Train hard, race harder, and party the hardest. I know I am. We'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.